History is a collection of sunsets. The end of armies, the fall of empires, the final breath of kings. But few sunsets have ever burned as fiercely or as defiantly as the one that settled over Alexandria in the year 30 BC. This wasn't just the end of a life, it was the end of an era. The end of the pharaohs. It was the last, calculated act of a woman who had been a queen, a goddess, a mother, and a legend. This is the story of Cleopatra's final hours. Not as a vanquished victim, but as the master of her own, immortal destiny. To understand her end, we must understand the world she fought to protect. Cleopatra VII Philopator was no mere seductress of Roman generals. She was a scholar, a brilliant polyglot who spoke 9 languages, a naval commander, and a fiercely intelligent ruler descended from the line of Alexander the Great himself. For over 2 decades, she had played a deadly game of political chess against the most powerful nation on earth, Rome. She had wagered her kingdom on alliances of love and power, first with Julius Caesar, and then with the formidable Mark Antony. But now, the game was over. The Roman wolf was not just at the door, it had devoured everything. The dream of a grand Eastern empire, ruled from Alexandria by Antony and Cleopatra, had died in the waters of Actium. It was there that their combined fleets were shattered by Antony's rival, the cold, calculating Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. In the wake of that disaster, Antony's legendary legions deserted him. One by one, the kingdoms loyal to him bent the knee to the new, undisputed master of Rome. Now, Octavian's forces stood at the very gates of Alexandria. The city, once the vibrant heart of the world, held its breath, waiting for the inevitable end. For Cleopatra, the stakes were absolute: the survival of her dynasty, the future of her 4 children, and the independence of Egypt itself. Inside the royal palace, the air was thick with despair. Mark Antony, the once great general, was a broken man. He paced the halls like a caged lion, swinging from volcanic rage to inconsolable grief. He had built a small refuge by the harbor, calling it his Timonium, after a famous Athenian hermit who had renounced all humanity. It was a fitting name for a man who felt the world, and his own honor, had abandoned him. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, had retreated to her mausoleum. It was a fortress and a treasury, a monumental tomb she had built for herself, stocked with gold, silver, pearls, and ivory. A final, magnificent bargaining chip, or, if all else failed, a spectacular funeral pyre. As Octavian's cavalry swept into the city, a desperate plan was put into motion. To galvanize Antony into one last, heroic stand, a message was sent to him. Cleopatra was dead. The lie worked, but not as intended. Hearing the news, Antony's world collapsed. There was no longer any reason to fight, no world left to win. He asked his most loyal servant, Eros, to kill him. But Eros, unable to strike his master, turned the sword on himself. Shamed and inspired by this act of devotion, Antony fell upon his own sword. The wound was clumsy, agonizing, and not immediately fatal. As he lay bleeding, a second messenger arrived, breathless. The queen was alive. She had barricaded herself in her tomb and was calling for him. What followed was one of history's most tragic scenes. Antony's guards carried their dying general to the base of the mausoleum. The doors were sealed shut. The only way in was through a high window. Ropes were lowered, and with the help of her 2 devoted handmaidens, Iras and Charmian, the queen of Egypt herself, her hands raw and bleeding, hoisted the broken body of the man she loved into her sanctuary. He died there, in her arms, tasting wine from her lips as his last communion. He begged her to make her peace with Octavian, to trust only one of his men, and not to grieve for their fall, but to remember the glory of their life together. With his death, the last echo of the dream faded. Cleopatra was now truly alone, a queen with no army, a woman with no protector, surrounded by the silent treasure of her ancestors. Octavian knew the value of what lay inside that tomb, and he knew the value of its occupant. He had no desire for the queen to perish amidst her flaming treasure, nor did he want her to rob him of his ultimate prize. The greatest spectacle for a Roman triumph was a captured foreign monarch, paraded through the streets of Rome in golden chains. He sent his trusted officer, Gaius Proculius, the very man Antony had warned her to trust, to negotiate. While Proculius distracted her at the sealed main gate with promises of clemency, other soldiers used ladders to scale the walls, entering through the same window that had admitted the dying Antony. The queen was caught completely by surprise. In a flash of defiance, she snatched a dagger, intending to end her life, but she was swiftly disarmed. Cleopatra, a descendant of gods and kings, was now a Roman prisoner. A few days later, Octavian himself came to see her. It was the final showdown. She received him in a chamber of mourning, dressed in simple, alluring robes, the portraits of her beloved Julius Caesar strategically placed around her. She was no longer a young woman, now 39, her beauty tempered by grief and anxiety, but her charisma was undimmed. She tried every art she possessed. She flattered, she reasoned, she wept. She presented him with a list of her treasures, hoping to bargain for her life and for her children's future. It was a masterful performance. But Octavian was not Caesar. He was not Antony. He was immune to her charms. He spoke to her with cold, calculated courtesy, promising her that no harm would come to her, all while his eyes surveyed his future prize. A servant's betrayal revealed that she had hidden much of her wealth, but it didn't matter. Octavian wasn't there for her gold. He was there for her. He wanted her alive, humbled, to be the star attraction in his celebration of conquest. He spoke of honor and respect, but his words were a death sentence. To be led in a triumph was the ultimate humiliation, a public stripping of her identity, her royalty, and her divinity. For Cleopatra, it was a fate far worse than any death. In that moment, she knew. Her last gambit had failed. There was only one path left. Feigning resignation, she made a simple request: to be allowed to perform final rites at Antony's tomb. Octavian, believing he had finally broken her spirit, agreed. It was his final, fatal underestimation of the queen. She made her preparations with regal solemnity. She was bathed, anointed with perfumed oils, and dressed in her finest robes, the full regalia of the goddess Isis, whom she believed was her divine ancestor. She then sat down for a magnificent last meal. During the feast, a humble farmer arrived, carrying a basket of figs as a gift for the queen. The guards, seeing nothing amiss, let him pass. Hidden beneath the sweet fruit was the instrument of her liberation. An asp, the sacred serpent of the pharaohs, whose bite was said to grant immortality. As the Egyptian sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a final, golden glow over her kingdom, Cleopatra held the serpent to her skin. Her two loyal maids, Iras and Charmian, chose to follow her into the afterlife. When Octavian's guards, finally alerted, burst into the room, they found a scene of silent, majestic defiance. Cleopatra lay on her golden couch, serene, as if sleeping. Iras was dead at her feet, and Charmian, swaying as the venom took her, was adjusting the queen's diadem. "Is this well done, Charmian?" one of the soldiers angrily demanded. She looked at him, and with her last breath, gave a reply that would echo through eternity. "It is well done," she whispered, and fitting for a descendant of so many kings. Octavian was robbed of his victory. He had conquered her kingdom, but he had not conquered its queen. In a final act of grudging respect, he honored her last wish, burying her with full royal honors beside her beloved Antony. The sun had set on the age of the pharaohs, but the legend of Cleopatra had just begun. A story that reminds us that the most powerful cages are not made of iron bars, but of circumstances, and that true freedom, sometimes, is found only in the final choice.